This is a true story in which a group of boys come face to face with something dark, something evil, and something older than any human on this earth. Make sure to save and share this video, and if you have the guts, make sure to save it for 3 AM. Now this story, it begins years ago when the uncle who told me this story was just a boy. The story takes place when he was around 10 or 12. And one summer, what him and his family do is they decide to go back to Kashmir in Pakistan for a holiday. Just to visit everyone, see how everyone is, because they have family back there. Now his family, they actually lived in a village inside of Kashmir. Now this village, of course, it was surrounded by old buildings, forests, waterfalls, the whole lot. However, there was one place inside of this village that no one spoke about. Sectioned off from the rest of the area, cut off, there was a little place in which there was a well, an old stone well. Now the elders of the village told everyone to stay away. They didn't explain why, they just said that things happen over there that shouldn't be talked about. However, the villagers, they had rumors, people that had gone over there seen strange things, heard strange sounds, and a lot of the time come back ultimately terrified. Now the uncle, who was a boy, he knew none of this. On the very first night that the uncle landed, his cousins decided that him and them should go around and explore the village. In their eyes, they wanted to show him something special. So on the first night, what the boys did at midnight, they all snuck out of the house. The boy and 6 of his cousins, and they took off. They went deeper into the village. Now as they're walking around, they eventually get to the end of the village. Well, that's what it seems like, since it's actually sectioned off by a physical barrier, a wooden fence that stretches from one end all the way to the other. Now this wooden fence actually separated the one well from the rest of the village. And so what the cousins did is they told the boy hurriedly to jump over the fence. Hesitantly, he did, and the rest of the cousins followed. Not too far in the distance now, they could see the stone well itself, but there was something off about it. For one, it seemed like it had never been used. And for two, even the area around it seemed off. So much so to the point that where the boys had entered the section, they felt like something was watching them instantly. The uncle described it to me as being extremely cold, and what him and his cousin saw next only made everything more cold. Standing beside the well was a dark, black creature, the size of a grizzly bear, except it had no obvious shape. The creature was tall and it was looming, and its eyes were completely white. The cousins and the boy in turn saw it one by one, some frozen in fear, others jumped in fright. But the boy, he screamed and he ran the opposite way. As he sprinted off, the rest of the cousins followed him. As they were sprinting away, one of the boys, they turned around, only to see that this huge shadowy figure was actually following them. And not only matching their speed, but going faster. The boy and his cousins reached the fence and instantly they jumped over. Once they all vaulted the wooden fence, they carried on sprinting home. Once they got home, they all ran into one of the rooms and they all laid down, out of breath. No one said a single thing, except one cousin who starts reciting Ayatul Kursi. Make sure to follow this account if you want more videos like this in your feed. This story was actually told to me by an uncle who actually recognized me, which is crazy in my opinion.
This right here is one of the saddest and most mysterious stories you'll ever hear. It all started with these 2 girls right here. You see the guy, we low-key don't care about him, we'll come back to him later. You see the girls, this is Joanna and this is Jacqueline. Joanna and Jacqueline were 2 sisters living together, and one day in 1975, on a random day, they were going to church. So on that day, Joanna and Jacqueline got ready, went down the street, and on their way to church, they got unalived by a speeding car. I know that was shocking, but sorry, that's what happened. A speeding car didn't see them and hit them all 3. The car hit them, the boy got transported to the hospital very quick, but Joanna and Jacqueline sadly got unalived instantly. Oh, as you can imagine, this was a tragedy. 3 young innocent kids hit by a who can't drive. Everybody felt sorry for them back then, and the girls' parents were devastated. Father of the girls even said that he was sure that Joanna and Jacqueline will come back one day, but as you can imagine, that doesn't work. You know, he was just hopeless, wishing for something like this to happen, knowing that it's impossible. And ladies and gentlemen, this was the sad story. I'm sorry if it did something to you. See you on the next one. Why did you stay? Oh, you stayed because you want to know the whole story? Well, here it is. You see, just 1 year after the accident, 1 single year, the parents of Joanna and Jacqueline made a comeback because they didn't make 1 but 2 children. Yes, after that, Joanna and Jacqueline sadly got unalived. The parents didn't wait a single year and they made this. Look, okay, pause, stop. I'm not wishing this for nobody, okay? But if you let's imagine that your child got unalived 1 year ago. Aren't you supposed to be sad for a little bit of a long time? How did you manage to, in order to get children if you was sad? I don't know. Anyways, the parents have new kids now, Jennifer and Gillian, or Jillian, I don't know how to say it, and they are twins. So normally the parents were very happy, but everything changed when they became 3 years old. Because when they grew up a little bit, they started recognizing places they've never seen before. For example, one of them goes to their parents, they go okay, look, Dad, can we go to that park? Their parents would go what park you're talking about? That park we went to. Go to the left, down the hill, go to the right, wait a little bit, Go to the left, then left. You know what I'm talking about. How do you know that? We've never been there. Jacqueline and Joanna went to that park multiple times. Another thing that the twins did was recognizing their toys. For example, if you put two kids in the same room, they will immediately fight for toys. In this case, they didn't. Matter of fact, the toys I'm talking about were for Jacqueline and Joanna. But you see, when the twins saw these toys, they were like, oh yeah, we recognize those. Those are ours. They played with them exactly like the past sisters did. Jacqueline had a scar on her forehead before she passed. Jennifer has a birthmark in the exact same place. The sisters got unalived by a car. The twins are scared of cars. Matter of fact, every time a car is near them, Jennifer would say, a car is coming to get us. One last crazy thing, when they used to play together, one of them will lay on the ground and the other one will repeat, the blood is coming out of your eyes. Why the hell would the kid say that? Well, I'll tell you why, because they're not kids. No, they're not kids. They lived before and their names were Joanna and Jacqueline. Yes, if you didn't get this yet, people say that Joanna and Jacqueline got reincarnated in the body of the twins. 1 year later,
the Native Americans viewed the Northern Lights as spirits passing between worlds. Now, to them, it was sometimes considered a bad omen to see these lights, especially if there was a lot of red in the sky, because this meant that someone in their village would pass away. And the creepiest thing about the Northern Lights to them was probably that they believed there were a set of rules you must follow if you were to view the Northern Lights. Now, you were never to call to it, you were never to whistle or wave, you were to be respectful, or it could essentially take you away. Now, this story comes out of northern Wisconsin. There was this man named Jacob. Jacob said this one particular night, him and his buddies decided they were going to go out to this farm and view the Northern Lights. So they all get on their snowmobiles and they head off down this trail, which would take them to this big open farm. They get there about 8:30 at night and they park. They are sitting in front of where their snowmobiles are parked and they're looking up at the sky. And that's when they started to see just these beautiful lights, floating and dancing. And it was just this amazing sight. Now, they had all heard from their grandparents stories of that you should never whistle when you're looking at the Northern Lights. And one of them starts whistling and all of them start to laugh and they just thought it was a joke. But they said that's when all of a sudden all of their snowmobiles turned on by themselves. The lights came on and the engine started and they're like, what is going on? And all of these snowmobiles, they start going haywire. The lights are flickering, the engine's going off and on, the engine is revving by itself, and they can't figure out, what was going on. So they said that's when they looked up in the sky, and it almost appeared as if these lights were forming some kind of hand. And they were coming closer and closer towards them. So they jump on their snowmobiles, and they start speeding off down this trail. And they said as they're going down this trail, they began to be chased by something. They said they really couldn't describe what it was, but they could feel it. And it followed them all the way out of this farm. They get home that night, and Jacob goes to bed. And he said at 2 a.m, he wakes up to the radio in his room turning on by itself. And he said there was this really creepy lullaby that was playing. And he said he couldn't figure out how this thing had turned on because he never used it and he didn't even know if it was plugged in. And the next day, he talks with his friends. And they all that night had a same encounter. And he said within the next couple of months, 2 of those friends passed away in accidents. He said that there was a fire in his town. He said that his grandmother, his aunts, all got sick. And he felt like it was because they disrespected the Northern Lights.
This is an Appalachian story, but it involves pretty much every terrifying thing that you could think of that could happen in Appalachia, and this one terrified me. So this guy grew up in Henderson Ridge, and he grew up knowing these rules. Don't whistle after dark, don't answer the woods if the woods answer you, and if you see something in the woods that looks almost right, go inside. Now, he didn't take these rules seriously until the fall his cousin Jess moved in. One day, him and Jess are patching a fence line behind the house when they both hear their names being called, like by the tree line. First Brian's name, clear as a hello, and then Jess's. Here was the strange thing. It sounded just like his mother, as if she was tired. The only problem was his mother was in town closing up a pharmacy. So he looks down at his phone, and then he looks at the driveway, and his mom's car is gone. So they're just sitting there for a second waiting for their names to be called. They're just waiting to see if this thing says anything else. So at this point, they tell themselves that it's just the neighbors fooling around. But the next night, something stranger would happen. So the next night, they're inside when they start hearing something pacing the gravel beside the porch. Slow, deliberate rhythm, like a boot heel, then a scuff, then a quiet. Scary thing is his dog wasn't barking. He went and hid underneath a chair, and he was shaking so bad that his heels started to click. Brian decides that he's going to open the door because this dude is brave. So he walks over to the door and he opens it, but all he can see is fog. A week later, his cousin begs him to ride into town for a late shift. He says yes, and they take what's called the Ridge Road. No shoulder, tight turns, and deer everywhere. Just past this old sawmill, his headlights catch this shape standing in the ditch. Then the figure starts rising up onto the asphalt, and he said that this thing looked like a deer if somebody were to describe a deer who had never seen a deer before, if that makes sense. The legs were too long and they were bending the wrong way, and its head was cocked to the side. It just made him incredibly uncomfortable. It stared straight through the glass right at him, the way that a person does, and he swears this thing did not blink. Jess just whispers to him, "Don't say anything." Brian just eases around it, and then he looks in the rearview mirror, and this thing is taking 3 steps towards him, then another, then it just drops out of the light as if the road had swallowed it. He said for the rest of the ride they were so freaked out they didn't even talk to each other until they got to Main Street. So after midnight he drives home, and he drives down the same road, and his radio starts to fizz out, and it fizzes out normally where it does when he passes this rock cut. Right as the static rose, his mom's voice rose over it. She sounded calm and ordinary, and she said, "Pull over for a second." He said that he did, and his hand had already tapped the blinker when all of a sudden those rules rose up in his head. "Do not let it get you out of the car," he kept thinking, and then the voice just stopped. It didn't repeat. 2 nights later, the mimicry got mean. He woke up at 3 a.m. to his dog's low growling under the bed. His house had this weird pressurized quiet that they get before a storm, except for the forecast was clear. Then a knock at the door, not frantic. 3 measured taps. He goes to check the clock to see what time it is, and it's 3:12 a.m. Then he hears another knock at the same pace. Then his mother's hushed voice comes through the wood and says, "Honey, open up. I forgot my keys." He was halfway down the hall before the details snapped in place. His mother never called him honey. She calls him kid like she did when he was 6 years old, and if she left her keys in town, she would have called him. So he just immediately stops moving, but then the voice tries again. This time it sounds like a singer flipping flat, like, "Honey, let me in, it's cold." This time his dog just starts going crazy. He's barking at the door, he's growling, he's snarling. So Brian goes to the kitchen window and he just lifts the corner of the shades. There's no one there, no shadow, nothing. But then he hears it again, 3 knocks. He said that he actually answered, and he said, who is it? But silence. Then a new voice, but a child this time, or like an adult aiming to be a child. It said, "It's Jess. I don't feel right." That's when he made a rule of his own. No one gets in the house after dark unless I see their face in daylight. So he says, "Go to the front door. I'll meet you there." Nothing moved on the porch, but the dog's hackles stayed up, and then he started counting to 60. No steps, no boards, no weight shifting, but finally from the wrong side of the kitchen, outside of the far window over the sink, his mother's voice again. He hears her say, "Don't make this hard." He didn't sleep a wink that night, and then later on that day, when the sun finally rose up, he walks outside and he checks for handprints, footprints, nothing. It doesn't even look like a raccoon was out there. 2 days later, Jess comes home from the diner, and she's completely shaken. I'm assuming this is where she works. She said near the rock cut where the radio normally dies, she had seen a shape in the road. She said it was in the middle of the road this time, though, and it was standing in her headlights, and it was super tall, taller than a man, but wrong like a deer. She says that its legs were bent backwards, and as soon as she eased closer to it, it cocked its head really fast towards her and just watched her drive by. She said she started to feel this pressure behind her eyes like a migraine was starting, and then her hands went numb on the steering wheel. She went 30 yards past it, looks back in the mirror, and it is gone. So he said that after this, they did what normal mountain people do, and they asked around without saying too much, and people had stuff to say. One man said that he had chased a lame buck from his garden a week before, but as soon as it got to the tree line, it started walking on 2 legs. Another woman heard her husband calling from her back steps while he he was 2 counties away hauling cattle. And this is the creepiest one. A little boy from his church said that he heard his grandmother singing outside of a trailer. Only problem, his grandmother had passed away a week before. The next night around 2:40 p.m., the wind kind of kicked up a lot. It wasn't storming, but it was very windy, and his lamp outside went out. It went black. He was on the couch with his dog under his knees and in his lap, when suddenly he heard footsteps coming up on the gravel. First heavy, then light, almost if they were testing the weight, like a human. Then it stopped 6 inches from the back door, and he said that he literally stopped breathing. The knob turned a fraction and then stopped against the lock deadbolt. He said a full minute passes, and then the steps went down again. First slow, then quicker, then like a scuff, like something pawed the gravel and then sprinted away on 4 legs. He said the next day when it turned daylight, he went outside to check to see if there was any tracks anywhere. And again, there were no tracks. One thing that there was, though, it was a scratch on his deadbolt. A thin crescent of metal shaved from the faceplate, like a thumbnail had pressed and dragged down. He said after all of this happened that his cousin moved away. He kept the porch lights on all the time. He lived a little differently. He says if you ask him if he believes in SWs, he'll tell you that he respects the people that those stories belong to and the land they come from. He doesn't use the word where it doesn't belong. He said maybe it was a mimic, maybe it was a haint, maybe it was a not deer. He said what he does know is it was mimicking the voices of the people he loved. He said whatever name you choose, remember the rules. Don't answer a voice where it shouldn't be. Don't let anything talk you out of your car on a lonely road. And if it looks almost right, go inside, lock the door, and wait for daylight. So what did you guys think about that story? That story is so creepy. First of all, what is it called when you see like people with their legs backwards? The fact that this deer's legs was bent backwards really freaked me out. Like that is scary. I don't know what that is. The mimicking, it sounds like a mimic, but then like I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how to answer any of these questions. This was so much. Has anyone ever had this much happen to them? Like if you live in the Appalachian Mountains and you've had this much happen to you, please email me because I would love to hear your story because this is wild. I actually got this story off of R, put 2 and 2 together, starts with an R. But I thought it was super interesting and he swears this story is true. But I'm running out of time, so drop any thoughts, opinions, or anything else you can think of in the comments of what it may be, etc. But as always, please be respectful. And now on to my favorite part, which is the shout outs. ACC for random shit. I'm assuming that's account for random shit. That's so funny. Thank you so much for the comment that you left. You said that you love my stories and you watch them every day. I love that you watch them every day. Thank you so much for that type of support. It really means so much to me. Thank you for being a part of my community, and thank you for commenting and pushing my videos out, and thank you for watching my stories every day. That really means so much to me. I know I just said that, but I love hearing that. I appreciate you, and I hope you know how much I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. I hope to see more of you. I love you. Sarah Dag, you are so cute. You said that you love my excitement when I tell the stories, and I love that so much. You also said that my videos are a must before you go to bed. I love that because I listen to scary stories, as you guys know, before I go to bed. I love being that for other people. I am running out of time, but girl, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for being kind, and thank you for watching my stories so much. It means so much to me. I appreciate you. Love you. And I don't have time for the outro, but I love you guys so much. Have a spooky night. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Can we show them the older homestead?
Yeah, let's go. As you know.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Was that you?
Yeah, that's on either side.
They went to both.
Yeah.
Let's read some more scary Reddit stories. When I was a kid, my room didn't have curtains or blinds. One night I was trying to sleep and it looked like a man was outside of my window. I screamed and ran and told my parents, but they didn't believe me and said it was just a nightmare. I tried to go to sleep and I brought our dog in my room for protection, but the dog wouldn't stop barking, so my dad took the dog out. Then I saw the gleaming, creepy eyes watching me. An upside-down face grinned from outside my window. I screamed, but my parents still didn't believe me. I thought I was going to be unalived all night. The next morning, there was yelling and then the cops. Turns out there was a wanted man hiding out on our roof with a bunch of H all night. And when he tried to leave in the morning, our neighbor saw him climbing off of our roof and into his yard, so he beat the crap out of the guy before calling the police. My parents didn't apologize, and they never got me curtains even though I begged. Okay, parents, that's kind of crazy. Why wouldn't you get your kid curtains after that? That's insane. I worked at a campground on night shift, 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. every night. It wasn't bad. I would bring in my PS2 and game a good portion of the night, only having to deal with 1 or 2 people on busy nights. It was just me in this little 8x8 shack with nothing around but dark all night. My first week there, the other third shift guy who was quitting told me about this payphone a few feet from the shack where I worked. He said it rang every night at 4:17 a.m. just once. It was probably just an automated test call, he guessed. He's never answered it himself. I go for a few months with the job. It was the middle of summer, so most nights I had the windows closed so I couldn't hear the payphone go off. Mid-August, I started leaving the windows open during the night. Sure enough, at 4:17 a.m. every morning, the phone would ring once. The ring even sounded creepy, like the payphone was submerged in water. One night I got up the nerve to answer it. I set an alarm at 4:15 and would go wait at the payphone until it rang. When it did, I answered it. But there was no sound. Just dead air, like someone was on the other line but wasn't answering. I said hello a few times and hung up. I did this every night for a week with the same results. I didn't think anything of it and left it alone after that for about a month. The first week of October, I decided to answer the phone once again. I set my alarm, and when the time came, I answered the phone. Hello? Hello? Then I heard what sounded like someone inhaling through clenched teeth. The voice that sounded was rough and sounded like he had gargled gravel. He said my name, my complete name, first, middle, and last. It was a voice I had never heard. My voice caught in my throat and I hung up. I rattled some change into the payphone and hit star 69. The number had come from California. I lived in Indiana. Back when I was in junior high school, my mom had an attractive 21-year-old Polish woman living with us in exchange for house upkeep. One weekend night, the woman staying with us came in from hanging out with friends and went into the basement where her bedroom was. When she got to the bottom of the stairs and turned the light on, a man dressed in black started walking toward her. She screamed and ran up the stairs. The man walked up the stairs and out of the house through the door at the top of the stairs. I'll never forget my brother, only 13 years old at the time, coming into my room saying he heard a scream. I hadn't heard it and told him he was hearing things. I woke up a half hour later to the police searching our house. They got prints off of the doorknob but couldn't find a match until they caught a man who would later be called the Birmingham Grapist, a man convicted of raping several women in the area we lived in. My mom told the police she distinctly remembers having locked all of the doors before going to bed. Apparently, this man had stalked the woman staying with us and watched our family's daily behaviors. He'd entered our home early in the morning while we were in the yard and sat in the basement of our utility room until she got home. The thought of us going about our day while a man sat in our house waiting for the right time to grape the woman staying with us creeps me out till this day. When I was about 17, I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. We had an apartment to hang out in at the top floor and used to go to the roof to smoke. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic portion that was connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we used our phones to guide us. It was an old building and the attic was creepy and cluttered all the time. I was heading over to the door that led out to the roof when I saw a shadow-like figure pass by me. I followed the direction it went, thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times in different areas, moving in different directions. Then I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the entire time. I have no idea what that shadow figure was, and I still refuse to go back up to the roof when it's dark after that night. My cats and I were sitting on my bed one day after college. The room got cold and I felt a weird presence. Both cats went to the end of the bed and were hissing at the doorway, their fur standing on end. About a minute later, it was over. The room went back to normal and my cats laid down to sleep. One of the cats lived to be 20 and never did anything like that before or after the event. The other cat I still have, and he's never done anything like that either. Anyway, a few days later, I found out someone I knew from college unalived himself that day, around that same time. That's really sad. But animals, they always know when something weird is going on.
What's that? Oh, you want to hear about the story that a woman sent me over about how her and her friends were having a little shindig before they went off to college, and something black and demonic looking and long-jawed started to chase her? Tell me more. Yeah, this girl decided that her and her friends should have this last little shindig before they go off to college. So her dad owns a bunch of properties. She decided to pick one of these properties to stay at for them to hang out at. They get there, and what they decide to do when they get there, it's starting to get a little dark, so they decide they're going to play a little bit of hide and seek in the dark out in the property. The property's pretty large and semi-wooded, so they go out there and they hide, and they still have a section they have to stay within, but they go and hide, and she starts looking for them. She tells them, hey, make sure you're not using your phone so I can't see. She notices a light, though, and decides to go follow this light, thinking, gosh, one of them are using a cell phone, and I found them now. And as she gets to this light, she realizes, oh, it's not one of my friends. It's the black-looking creature with a long jaw and looks a little demonic, how she describes it, and it starts to go ahead and run after. But, of course, it wasn't running like a human. It decided to get on all fours and take off after. She finds her friends and decides to tell them what's going on, what happened, how freaked out she is. And as she's telling them, they see this creature getting on all fours and sprinting now after all of them, so they run inside the house as quick as possible. They get inside, lock the doors. She immediately grabs her cell phone, tries to call her dad, no signal. Asks her friends, hey, can you guys call somebody? No signal for them either. This creature, if you will, decided to terrorize them all night long, walking on the roof. It jumped up on the roof. They saw it leap off the ground onto the roof. It toyed with them all night, but eventually they were able to not hear any noises anymore or see it anymore, so they fell off to sleep. After waking up, they realized they all have signals on their phones again. Now, they go out to start their truck, and the truck will not start. So the girl's dad that owns the place, she calls him, and he comes on his way to get. So while they're waiting, they see off in the distance this creature that is just staring at them the entire time they're waiting. Oh, goody.
Do you believe that mermaids are real? And would you believe me if I told you that many people have had encounters with them? I haven't done a mermaid story on my page in so long, but I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Rosie. So Rosie is from South Africa in a small town called Sakane on East Rand of Johannesburg. So as a kid, Rosie always had this feeling that she was born to bring about change. Like, this feeling was very strong, and she would tell her family about it, but they would just ignore her. So when Rosie turns about 6 to 7 years old, this is when she started to have these weird dreams, where she would have dreams about mermaids, and she would tell her grandmother, but her grandmother would ignore her. The dreams about mermaids would come every 2 weeks. So now fast forward to Rosie being 10. That's when she started to feel drawn to the water. She felt this pull as if she was being called to the water. And again, she would tell her grandmother, and her grandmother would ignore her. The grandmother would tell her, honey, it's just a feeling, it'll go away. But Rosie just lived with this feeling for a while. Fast forward again, now Rosie is 13 years old. And at that age, that's when Rosie entered high school, and she said that is when her life took a crazy spiritual turn. Once Rosie entered high school, she started experiencing something that she hadn't experienced before. The first day, she's hearing singing. So she looks over and asks her friend, like, hey, are you hearing this too? And her friend responded in a very exaggerated no. So she just brushed it off and said, maybe I'm just hearing things. She really didn't harp on that too much. Like, it's not a big of a deal that she heard singing and her friend didn't hear it. Now fast forward a couple of days, it happened again. The singing did happen again, but this time, her and her friend heard it. And it was literally coming from the direction of the dam. Mind you, the dam is 30 feet away from their lunch table, so it's relatively close. So as they're hearing this singing, something weird started to happen. Rosie says she can't even explain what the hell happened, but both ladies got up and just started walking towards the dam. No, they were not in control of that. And both ladies couldn't stop walking towards the dam. It is as though they were being drugged or something. They were so fogged mentally. Rosie recalls feeling like they were high as fuck. So they got close enough to the dam, and they were about 6 to 8 feet away from the dam. Rosie now starts kneeling on the grass, again, against her will, and began to sing along to the song that the marine slash mermaid spirit was singing. And mind you, Rosie didn't even know the song, let alone the language that these spirits were singing in. However, she kneeled and just joined the interaction, as if she knew the language, as if she sung it before, as if she knew the song. When suddenly, they snap out of it. Rosie looks over at her friend, and her friend is staring at her with this unsettling look of awe in her face. Now Rosie's looking over at her like, dude, what's up? And her friend looks at her and says, I heard something ask me, why am I here? Now Rosie knew her bestie, so she could tell she was sure about what she heard. And the friend goes on to ask Rosie if she heard it too. And Rosie just says no. Mind you, even though they snapped out of the trance that they were in, they still were feeling pretty high from whatever was in the air. But Rosie looks at her friend and says, we should go. Now Rosie starts to feel like there's something heavy in the air. So as they start to walk away, the friend says, stop. Look at that grape tree in the middle of the dam. And she was like, I want some of those grapes. And Rosie says, trust me, I tried to stop her from jumping in, but she just jumped right in. So her friend just jumped into this dam. And Rosie, being so damn scared, doesn't know what to do. Her friend just jumped in this dam, so she decided that monkey see, monkey do. She gonna jump in too. Rosie would jump off a cliff if her friend did it. Rosie says, I was so damn scared, but I just jumped in too so that I can save her. She saw the grape tree in the dam as well. However, her intuition was telling her that this wasn't a real tree. Luckily enough, she pulled her friend out of the water, and that's when she came to her senses. That's when the friend asked, what just happened? What is going on? And Rosie just told her, we have to go. They ran their asses out of there, and once they reached the schoolyard, that's when Rosie broke down everything to the friend. Even though Rosie broke out of her trance, she was just feeling high, her friend was still in it. Pretty much, Rosie's now catching her up on what happened once they reached the schoolyard. Rosie had enough for that day and said, let's go home. And oh my god. As they were about to leave school premises, this beautiful lady comes up to them, and mind you, everybody at the school was already gone by that time. Like, there was no teacher, no scholar, and only one security guard. So this gorgeous lady approaches them. She looks straight at Rosie with the most intense look. Rosie says she's never had anybody stare at her like that before. It felt like this lady was looking into her soul. Rosie describes this lady to have light hazel eyes. She had a lot of gold jewelry on, gold earring, gold necklace, and she had blue nails done. I'm telling you, this lady's presence made everything cold around us. It was a very sunny day, about 35 degrees Celsius. For the normal people, that's 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was 95 degrees outside. That lady's presence was so cold, Rosie had goosebumps, chicken skin all over her body. After that encounter, the lady turned around and walked straight in the direction of the dam. As you can see, this story is already 5 minutes long. So I'm recording the part 2 right now, but I'm gonna drop it the second that this video hits 10,000 views. And I'm doing it like that because I'm shadow banned on TikTok. So you guys, please go ahead, leave a comment, share this video, just so that it can get boosted. And as soon as it hits 10K, I promise you, I will drop the part 2. In the meantime, make sure you're following me on Instagram. It's Rebecca_Journey, just so that I know that it's real. And also follow me on YouTube for longer, better, and spookier stories. I will see you guys in part 2. I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
This is so terrifying. Welcome back to Nightmare Narratives, where you send me your spine-tingling ghost stories. Today's story was sent in by Diana, so this is the second one that she has sent in, and this one is scary. So let's jump into it. I went to visit my daughter and her husband in their new home, but from the moment I stepped inside, the house felt off. My daughter moved in, she found strange items tucked away in a cabinet in the kitchen. Odd things that didn't seem to belong. She told me about the old man who lived in the house before them. A man who had passed away. No one was sure if he'd passed in the house or not, but that didn't really seem to matter. From the moment those objects were moved, strange things began to happen. I suggested that they put the items back, thinking it might bring some peace, but I'm not sure if they ever did. One evening, my daughter and her husband went out, leaving me alone in the house. I decided to relax on their sectional, stretching out my legs in front of me on the ottoman. As I began to drift off, something pushed the ottoman hard. It slid out from under my legs, leaving me stunned. It wasn't a gentle nudge or the result of shifting weight. It was forceful and deliberate. On another night, while they had friends over, I sat quietly in a chair in the corner of the room. The conversation and laughter filled the house, but I couldn't focus on it. I kept feeling something brushing through my hair. Soft, deliberate touches that made my skin crawl. Then came the whispers, faint and unsettling, right in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but they were there. Later that night, I went to bed, determined to sleep and forget about the strange events. As I started to drift off to sleep, I suddenly felt a pressure on my arms, as if someone was pinning me to the bed. Then came the sound, an overwhelming noise in my head, like static mixed with whispers. I couldn't move, and I knew in that moment it was him, the old man. I struggled to break free, but I was trapped. Finally, with one desperate effort, I managed to jerk myself free. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and yelled into the darkness, "Leave me the fuck alone. You are not welcome in this room. I'm leaving in the morning and you will not bother me again." I turned on the bathroom light and left it on for the rest of the night. He didn't come back. But he wasn't done with my daughter. The old man stayed in that house, tormenting her until the day that she moved out. Luckily, when she left, he didn't follow. Whatever tied him to that place kept him there, but to this day, I still wonder if those strange objects in the cabinet had been some kind of anchor, something he couldn't let go of. One thing's for sure, his spirit isn't resting, and neither is that house. Oh my gosh, that's so creepy. Can you imagine something that you cannot see holding you down to the point where like you literally can't move? That is so terrifying. And it obviously sounds like maybe he was connected to those objects in some type of way, but also it's almost as if he was pretty much like, this is still my house and you guys need to leave. That's what I got from it. Diana did say that she has a lot of other stories, so of course, Diana, you can send them to me. I would love to hear them. Remember, if you have a ghost story that you would like to send in, you can send it to the email that is linked in my bio. It's a little bit different than it used to be, but you should see it. It'll say like, send me your ghost stories. You just click it and you'll be able to email it that way. My question for you guys is, do you think these objects tied him to the house, or was he just like, hey, this is my house, I'm gonna stay here forever? But that is it for today. Until next time, stay close to the light.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spell. Again, no spooky shirt, but these necklaces. It comes in a 2-pack, and they are incredibly cute when you stack them, as you can see. Perfect stocking stuffers. They're cheap and cute. They're like $13. 2 things that we love. Now on to the story. I wanted to share this spooky story that I experienced as a child. During my childhood, my parents would take me to visit our family in Mexico every year. We would stay at my maternal grandparents' house, which is known to have creepy vibes and unexplainable things happen. For context, this house is located in a former hacienda, which is filled with rich history from the mid-1800s. Also, for context, I would like to explain the layout of the grandparents' house. Please, God, let it be important to the story. So many people add that and it has nothing to do with it. The house has a central courtyard, meaning every single room is disconnected from each other and you have to go outside if you want to go to another room, the bathroom, etc. That sounds like it potentially would be important, yes. One year when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was getting ready for bed. As a child, I was afraid of the dark, and at my grandparents, it was always pitch black outside if the lights weren't on. My mom walked me to my bedroom and tucked me into one of the 2 beds. My mom left and turned the lights off on her way out. I fell asleep for some time and woke up in the middle of the night, and I looked over at the bed next to me. I saw a figure on the bed. At first, I thought it was one of my family members that had joined me after I'd fallen asleep. As I started to focus my vision, I realized it wasn't someone I knew. The person in the bed next to me was dressed in all black, wearing a poofy dress like the Victorian style dresses with a black veil over her head. She was kneeling at the foot of the bed and facing the head of the bed. At the head of the bed, my grandma had hung a large cross along with her rosary. The way that the figure was kneeling, it looked like she was praying. As I had fully processed what I was seeing, I remember feeling very scared. I didn't want to get up because I was scared of this woman, and I was also afraid of running outside in the dark too. My only choice was to hide under my blanket and lay perfectly still in hopes that this figure would disappear. Next morning, I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to believe what I saw to be true. Instead, for the remainder of our stay, I made sure to always share a room in bed with my older sister. Years later, when I was about 15, when we went to visit again, we were talking about scary things that we have seen in my grandparents' house. And my mom and my aunt start talking about how they've seen a woman in a black dress in multiple parts of the house. That's when I remember what I had seen years prior. It was so crazy because none of us had ever shared our own encounters with this figure, but yet we were all able to perfectly describe every single detail. The only thing that my aunt and my mom noted was that even though this woman was wearing a black veil, they never saw her face or head. They always just saw a floating veil. To this day, my grandparents' house still makes me feel uneasy and scared, and no one knows who this mysterious woman is. Has anyone done any research? Like, did you look up maybe potentially what it could be? If she was just like, just chilling, praying at the foot of the bed, obviously seeing her and that not being someone that you know would be terrifying at the time. But if you're talking about it later on, it seems like hindsight, it might have not been that scary because if she was just praying, you know what I mean? Definitely scary at that time. Still very creepy, but not like threatening scary. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel like I would try and dig a little bit deeper to figure out, because if all of y'all have seen her and you can describe it in detail and the stories match perfectly, there's got to be something somewhere. You know what I mean? Let me know what y'all think in the comments. You can rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most, if you want to. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Can we show them the older homestead?
Yeah, let's go. As you know.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Was that you? Yeah, that's on either side. They went to both. Yeah.
Oh my god, guys, listen to this story. It creeps me out so bad. Creepy story time. So this guy says that he and his mother had an encounter with what he can only describe as a doppelganger. Now, I don't know. It could be many different things. I am not sure, so you'll have to let me know what you think. He starts off by saying his dad worked nights when he was about 6 or 7 years old. He said he was winding down, getting ready for school the next day, and he was waiting for his mom to pour a glass of milk for him like she always did. At first, it was a normal night like any other one, and he was just sitting there looking into his dark living room, sort of zoning out, waiting for the milk. During one of his head swivels, looking around, just waiting, he noticed his dad appeared in front of the closet door in the living room. Because at first that it didn't really bother him, he just assumes it was his dad standing there. But when he looks back to think about it, he said there was zero noise, and they had like old creaky floorboards in this house, so he would have heard him sort of coming or going. But he literally just stood there staring. He said he did not move an inch. He did not blink. And the longer they just stared at each other, he started noticing his dad's eyes. They were too small to be his dad's eyes. They were wide open, but still so small on his head that it didn't look right. He said he then started to like rub his eyes to like shake it off, just try to understand what it is that he was seeing. And it just kept standing there and it kept staring at him for probably another minute more. And then after that, it just sort of vanished. When it vanished, it was in such a blink that there was no way that it is humanly possible for that to have happened without making a noise, because there was no noise. Just there and then gone. He also remembers looking up to his mom to kind of see if she saw it too, but when she didn't react or say anything, he thought maybe he just hallucinated it. For years he thought this. Now since then, his mom has passed, but he said that a few years ago he was telling the story to his real dad, and he did admit that the mother had come to him and mentioned the same story, but at the time she was having some mental health issues, so he chalked it up as didn't really happen. Please let me know your thoughts on what this could have been, and as always, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
You guys want to hear a scary story? So this was a story from the house I used to babysit for that was extremely haunted. If you haven't watched my other videos, there's a playlist, it'll make more sense. So Luna, the oldest, was the one that was very attached to Pete, her imaginary friend, which was an evil entity living and thriving and scaring everyone in this home. And I'm sure it presented itself different to her, because I had asked her before, what does Pete look like, you know? Because I saw him as a tall, terrifying, hunched over, clawed, red-eyed, nightmare fuel, like, spirit entity. And she would always tell me Pete's a little boy. So I think that we were seeing the same entity, but it was presenting itself differently to her than it was to me. So this specific time, are you okay? My kitten's still learning how to like jump off. So this specific day, I was on a walk with the girls. We were just walking around the neighborhood, and there was this cat that was a stray cat, feral cat. And it was funny because every time we'd get like, what? Speaking of cats, I know she hates this. Is she not the cutest thing you've ever seen? Oh my god, I just died. So anyways, we're on a walk, and this cat is running, like every time we get a little bit closer to it, because it's a stray cat, it gets the zoomies and it runs like away, but then it would go in a circle and it would go across like to the neighbor's yard across the street, and the girls just thought it was really funny. And so anyways, Luna, the oldest one, tried to like run up to it, and then it really ran away, like sprinted to where we couldn't see it. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, Riley. You know why that's so funny? And I was like, why? You know, I'm in a good mood. I think it's all cute. And like Aura, the youngest one, is laughing too. Like, we're all thinking it's just good fun, cute cat. And she's like, it's so funny because sometimes Pete likes to run just like the cat. Pete likes to run just like the cat. I was like, what? Pete runs on his hands and feet. And she's like, yeah, it's so funny. Like, sometimes Pete likes to run like that too. And she was all giggly. And I'm just trying to keep my cool, because I know she probably sees this as a little boy, but I'm picturing this crazy looking thing running at me on all fours. That aside, even the little boy that she used to see him as, it would appear to her as, a little boy running on its hands and feet, I'm okay. That's fucking terrifying. And anyways, I just let that one go, okay? Because I'm already not going to sleep tonight picturing that in my head. So I go back to the house, About 30 minutes goes by. Sorry, of course I have a horror movie on in the background. And anyway, so they had this big, long, dark hallway that I used to hate because I had so many shitty and terrifying experiences looking down this hallway. And at the end of the hallway is by the front door. You like walk in the front door, there's the girls' rooms, and then there's this long hallway. So hallway starts here, right? You walk down the hallway, and then there's like the living room and the kitchen. It's like one big space. Luna often loved to just sit in this hallway. Like, I would put her to bed, right? And I would catch her sometimes waking up just sitting in the hallway and whispering in the dark. And when it was daytime out, sometimes she'd just sit at the end of the hallway closer to like their rooms in the front door and just talk. I absolutely hated it. So anyways, we're watching a movie, finishing up food, and Luna is in the hallway talking to herself, whispering. I'm like, come here, baby. And she's like, hold on, Riley, I'm talking to Pete. And I said, no more Pete time. Like, we don't talk to Pete, remember? Because I kept trying to. Do you see how this filter is making my eyelash look all crazy? I don't like that. But I would always try and discourage her from talking to Pete because I know it's not an imaginary friend, and I know that it's not something that is good or means any good, only harm. And she's like, oh, fine. And then I hear her whisper one more time, and then she giggles. And then she starts sprinting into the living room. I swear to God, guys, I heard a second, pair of running. So I can hear her feet. I know what her run sounds like because I was their babysitter for so many years. I hear her running, and I look over and I kind of see her running, and then I hear it sounded like a dog. You know when a dog runs, it hits its hands and feet, on all fours, obviously? It sounded like that. Y'all, I didn't look. At this point, I'm saving myself as much fucking trauma as I possibly can. I'm not gonna look over there. And, Luna runs back in the living room. She's all giddy and she's laughing. She's like, Riley, wasn't that so funny? I told him to show you. I told him to show you how he can run like the cat. That was one of, I know it might sound mild compared to other experiences I had at this home, but honestly, that was probably one of the most scary experiences I had because I didn't actually look, but I always pictured what that would have looked like, and I 100% know that it was happening because I heard it. Even though I didn't see it, I didn't want to see it, I knew it was happening. That was, I couldn't wait to go home after that, guys.
So I have a spooky story for you, and this one takes us to the American Southwest. So our story for the night follows a photographer, and this photographer's name is Thomas. Now Thomas has a very specific niche, and that is to go to ghost towns and take photographs of all of the eeriness that exists there. After that, he sends them to magazines, they publish them, wash, rinse, and repeat. Now there's one day in particular where Thomas is going from one ghost town to another. We'll say the first one is in New Mexico, the second one is in Arizona. But in transit, his radiator goes out and he's stranded. Now, luckily for Thomas, it was only 115 degrees that day. But sadly, there were no other cars in sight and he appeared to be stranded in the absolute middle of nowhere. So his only option was to walk to the closest town. Fortunately, Thomas did have a map and he was pretty good at reading it. And so as he looked down on the map, he noticed that there was a town close by called Red Ridge. And if he could make it there, he could possibly find some assistance, get his radiator fixed or at least his car towed, and managed to get on to the next destination. Now, I should add that Thomas did have a cell phone, but as luck would have it, of course it didn't work. There was no signal, and so he couldn't call anybody. So as he started to walk through this desert to find this nearest town, he noticed two things. One is that he was starting to get dizzy, and two, he noticed that he had stopped sweating. So he was in dire straits. Now, as he continued to walk, he started to lose hope, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this town appears. Now, Thomas is overjoyed at this point. He can't believe his luck, and he uses what little energy he has to go into this town. But as he gets there, though, he notices that there is nobody there. This is a desolate location. It's a ghost town, really. Now, much like I would do in a similar situation, the first thing Thomas did was take out his camera and start taking pictures. The second thing he did once he was done is go and explore. Now, for me personally, I probably really would have gotten in the shade and rested a bit, but Thomas was desperate. He was thirsty or dehydrated, he was delirious, and he was slightly curious about this town that he had chanced upon. So as Thomas continued through this town, a sinking pit started to develop in his stomach when he realized that there was nobody else in this town. Not a means to call anyone, not a means to get his vehicle fixed, and definitely not a means to get out. But most of all, There was not even any water to drink. But as he stood in the middle of the town lamenting his decisions, he started to hear a very faint noise. As he listened more closely, though, the noise started to get louder. And for the second time that day, Thomas felt excitement. So he decided to pursue the sound. And as he continued to do so, it took him to an old saloon in an isolated part of this town. And as he approached the saloon, he saw his first sign of life. There was a man standing outside of what would be considered the patio portion, and he had on this old-timey gear. Imagine the gold rush era of U.S. history. Now, as Thomas approached this man, he asked him if there was some sort of movie happening. And the man looked at him a little weird, and Thomas could tell that there was something off about him. But Thomas was starting to get really desperate. Again, that dehydration was setting in. He was overheated, delirious, I'm sure. And this is when he reached his boiling point. He asked the man if there was any phones around there, and the man looked confused. He was like, "A phone? What is that?" And Thomas appeared to lose his mind, but you could see he dialed it in just in time. And this is when he asked the man if he was joking. The man took great offense to this, and all of a sudden, Thomas found himself in a headlock with a knife to his throat. And this is when he realized that things were going from bad to worse. And so realizing the danger, Thomas did the only thing he could do, which was start apologizing. Now, the man relinquished his grip on him a little bit, and Thomas continued to plead with the man. The man looked at him, said he's no joke, and then he spit on his shoes. And Thomas apologized again. He looked at somebody else walk out of the saloon area in another old-timey brothel-esque outfit, and the man looked at him, bid him good day, and spit on his shoes again. At this point, Thomas didn't want the smoke. What he wanted was some water, so he walked inside of the saloon quickly after. And once he got inside, things just got weirder. Again, much like the man outside, everyone in there was dressed like they were on the set of a Clint Eastwood movie. Western gear all over the place. And he also noticed that nobody acknowledged him. So he took this opportunity to take out his camera yet again and take photos. Now, he forgot to turn the flash off, and so once he started to photograph these people, the flash alerted everybody. They all stopped what they were doing, as though in sync, and they turned around to look at the man who caused the disturbance. Noticing this, Thomas apologized for his disruption and headed towards the bar. Now, the first thing Thomas did when he got over to the bar was order the coldest beer they had in stock. But sadly, the bartender had to let him know they had beer, it just wasn't cold. And once the bartender bought him his beer, Thomas handed him a $20 bill. And this is when the bartender looked at the bill, he looked at Thomas, and he got real upset because they didn't take that kind of money there. You either paid gold or silver. Now, Thomas was taken aback by this because this is obviously legal tender. It's a $20 bill. But the barman didn't seem to care. It was either gold, silver, or bust. And sadly, Thomas didn't have any gold or silver on him, so the bartender took his damn beer back, and Thomas was left there confused, angry, still overheated, and now dehydrated. And so what happened next would cause a small argument that drew in attention. He started to argue with the bartender because the bartender didn't appear to have anything that Thomas needed. He didn't want to take his money. He didn't have cold beer. He was in the middle of this country western movie set. And so the bartender looks at Thomas and tells him that he needs to relax and calm down because the heat can play with your mind. And as he says this, Thomas loses it in response to this. He calls everybody in there crazy and says they're taking it way too far. And this is when everybody stops and looks at Thomas. Now, Thomas, realizing that he was outmatched and outgunned, decided to calm down for the second time that afternoon. And this is when he notices that the man sitting next to him at the bar has a newspaper. So he quickly grabs this newspaper out of this man's hands, and that pisses the man off, obviously. But as he's looking at this newspaper, he hones in on the title and the date. It's August 27th, 1854. And the title says, Red Ridge Gold Rush Takes Off. But Thomas, again, is losing it because if the year is actually 1850-something, that would put Thomas more than 150 years into the past. But again, because he snatched this newspaper out of this man's hands, the bartender has to step in and they throw Thomas outside onto the sidewalk. And this is where things get even worse for Thomas. Now, for the second time today, Thomas is stuck outside, but this time he's sprawled out on the ground. And as he is laying there trying to get his bearings, he noticed that there's a black-clad figure approaching him. It's the sheriff. Now, the sheriff is looking down at him, and he tells him that he doesn't like anybody in his town causing disturbances. This is where Thomas gets up. He's happy to see somebody in law enforcement. And this is when he starts to cop his plea to the sheriff. He tells him about what happened to his car, how the radiator busted, how he had to walk all the way from wherever he was to this place, how they didn't have cold beer, how they didn't want to take his money, somebody held him at knife point, and how he ended up on the ground. Now, the sheriff is looking at him, just really strange and everything. And this is when the sheriff looks him dead in the eye and says, "I don't like anybody causing mischief in my town." So Thomas decides to take out his cell phone and show him that it's not like he's trying to. He tried to call for help a while ago. Seeing this, the officer takes out his gun and he shoots the phone. There's a giant hole in it. So now Thomas is really SOL. He's decided he's had enough of this newcomer, this foreigner in his town, and the sheriff decides he has no choice but to cuff him and throw him in the local jail. And as he's sitting in there, he's begging the sheriff not to leave him in there by himself. He just wants to go home. And this is when the sheriff closes the door of the jail cell and he walks out. So at this point, Thomas is alone in this jail cell, and due to the exhaustion of the day, he falls asleep, and it's a deep sleep. Now, the next day, he awakens to the sound of tire tracks, and this jolts him right out of his sleep. Luckily for Thomas, as he jumps out of bed, he notices that the jail cell, which had definitely been locked the night before, is now miraculously unlocked. So he pushes it out, and he runs towards the street, and to his shock and awe, there's an actual car out there. It's the local police department. He runs over to the officer, and the officer is looking at him, and he wonders what's going on with this man who happened to find himself in possibly the worst town ever, miles away from anybody. And this is when Thomas tells this man everything that he went through. He tells him about his car breaking down, how he ended up in this town in the middle of nowhere, how he approached the saloon, and when he got over to the saloon, there was a man standing outside, and he had on this old-timey outfit, and how he stuck a knife to his throat. He told him about the hostility inside of the saloon, and how nobody wanted to help him out, and how he was arrested by the sheriff. And so the police officer is looking at him, and this is when Thomas notices something about his face. He looks eerily similar to the bartender. And what the man says next would send chills up Thomas's spine. He looks at Thomas, very steely-eyed, and he goes, "You need to relax, son, because sometimes the heat can play tricks with your mind." It's the same exact thing the bartender said the day before. Now, Thomas is spooked at this point, but the officer offers to give him a ride back to his car so they can have it towed. So Thomas happily accepts the officer's offer. And as he's going around to the officer's passenger door, he looks on the ground and he sees a cell phone. But when he picks the cell phone up, he notices that there's a bullet hole in it, the same place that the officer shot through it the day before. Anyways, I want to know what you guys are thinking about this story. Let me know if you think Thomas wandered into a ghost town. Perhaps it was some sort of time slip. Maybe he really was interacting with a memory trapped in time. Just drop your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next video.